Welcome to the Water Trough, where we can't make you drink, but we will make you think. My name is Ed Drozd, the Small Business Doctor, and I'm really excited you chose to join me here as we discuss topics that are important for small business folks just like you. If you're looking for ideas, inspiration, and possibility, you've come to the right place. Join us as we take steps to help you create the healthy business that you've always wanted. Welcome, folks. This is Ed Drozd, the Small Business Doctor, and I am delighted today to have Jennifer Eichenberg. Jennifer is the owner of Eichenberg Associates and an organizational change management practitioner. She works with C-suite folks who are frustrated with implementing technology in the organization and not getting the rate of adoption they expected. And let me make a personal comment here. Change. You love it or you hate it, but you hate it. So, Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you, Ed. Glad to be here.
You know, Jennifer, the idea of change, it's good to know there are people like you in the world that support people trying to get through this, because while it's absolutely essential, it really is awkward for most of us to some degree. And hearing from an expert about how to deal with this is something I think everybody will find very exciting. So let me open with a question. What makes change challenging for us human folks?
Good starting point, Ed. So let me just set a foundation why it's so difficult and why we as humans hate change. And that is because all change is a disruption to the status quo. So you're disrupting the status quo, no matter how much we don't like the status quo, it's status quo. It's our natural tendency. It's our norm. It's our routine. And as humans, we thrive on having a routine, and we thrive on being predictable as to this is going to happen. So change is a disruption, even if it's expected, even if it is long overdue. When you're disrupting that status quo, you're going to trigger some kind of emotion. And oftentimes, unfortunately, it's a negative emotion. Could be anxiety. It could be fear. It could just be frustration as well, right? So leaders really need to be mindful of that just foundation. I'm introducing a disruption to the status quo. There's going to be some kind of emotion triggered. And then people are also going to spin into a bit of chaos. Well, what does that change mean to me? How am I impacted? Right. And so there's a bit of chaos that happens during the first introduction to, hey, we're going to change. Right. And that's all very natural. We're just hardwired to have that kind of reaction.
And yeah, we all have our comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
And our comfort zone is probably defined by, as you said, the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
That is what I'm familiar with. That is what I know. I know how to respond and how to react. Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to give you a personal example of a really good change that happened to me very recently, I got engaged. And
congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Woo.
So you can imagine that's a great change. But at the same time, it has triggered a bit of anxiety for me. It means that I'm relocating, right? It means that I'm abandoning being a single person from a very, very long period of time to now cohabitating with someone. So while that is all good, and I love John, and we are going to be very happy, I'm well aware of that change triggering anxiety because it's disrupting where I live. It's disrupting what I do. It's disrupting who I have come to be as a sense of myself. All very good change, all great change that I want to get to, but I'm also mindful of what it triggers internally for me.
Well, it brings to mind the two different kinds of stress, the distress, which is the dysfunctional, the difficult part. And in your case, I might say the eustress. The eustress, which is a positive stress. You're certainly in a state of euphoria about this engagement.
Yes.
But it does change that status quo. It does, even if it's the best thing in the world, it's just not the same old thing.
Exactly. And I'm very mindful as a change practitioner to realize that I would experience this, I am experiencing it, and that I need to be patient with myself as I transition through it.
Again, you caught me off guard. I shouldn't say you caught me off guard. We don't really know each other, but I just have to say once again, congratulations. That is so cool. I mean, how much more can you ask for than that?
Yeah, great change.
That is fantastic. That is really fantastic.
But
Oh,
if I
sorry.
may,
Yeah, please.
organizations don't always have that kind of happy change that they're announcing. So I give the example only because if it is an organizational change that's long overdue, people aren't always going to hip hip hooray, kind of have that attitude the whole journey through that change.
Well, typically in organizations, change emanates from a small group of people,
Mhm.
uh, and the majority have no control over the change. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. It's usually leaders at the top creating the decision to change, and they're seeing something on the landscape, right? A competitor, an opportunity that is driving that change. So, yes, they are the ones who often drive the change, and therefore they need to be the ones leading the change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in this day and age, we have everything is going fast, right?
Yes.
Technology is growing in leaps and bounds. People are evolving in leaps and bounds. The demands and needs are expanding in leaps and bounds. So change is happening a lot
Mhm.
in order to keep up, because the reality is if you do stagnate, that status quo will not carry you. This is a time of rapid and often innovative change. So are people getting tired, fatigued by this thing?
Oh, absolutely. Change fatigue, whether or not you've heard that, change fatigue is real. It is a sense of our environment being volatile and it's uncertain and it's complex. And most of the time, it's ambiguous. You may know that term is VUCA. That's not going away. And as you just said, it's only speeding up. So organizations already run very lean, where you might be wearing already two, three hats, right? Hired to do more than you initially expected to. So now pile on this change initiative and this change initiative, and some of them are enterprise wide, and some may just be touching one or two teams, right? But what happens is you have a very demanding day job, right? Just to keep operations going. And now you're
Right.
layering these changes. And what's happening is burnout, especially when those changes don't work out. You have great intentions. The change happened over a course of weeks or months, and you don't get to the finish line successfully. That causes even more burnout. We did all of that work and we got very little payout for it. So change fatigue is real. And what I like to tell organizations is do what I call a heat map. And a heat map can be something just very simple in an Excel spreadsheet. List all your departments across the enterprise and then list all of the changes and then put a tick in each box who's impacted by that change. And then just create a criteria. If any change team is impacted by change in 4 times, put it as an orange. Anything more than 5, put it as red. And that helps you really visually see how much change is going on. And again, all change, whether it's small or transformational, companies will benefit to really understand how much change is going on so that they can better manage it.
That heat map sounds like a great tool, and I'm not sure that a tool like that is often used. I'm of the mind that leaders probably are more inclined to just go ahead and do what they do on account of what they see and what they believe is the right way to go.
Yeah. And this is where it becomes imperative for leaders to really articulate, why is this change necessary? What are we really truly getting out of it? Because people can't handle too much change. As I said, they've got their day job that's already very demanding, and then you could layer other things on top. It's no fun to work 12-hour days, plus weekends, plus holidays, plus whatever that may be. It's just a cause for burnout and does indeed happen, whether that burnout is just, I'm shutting down and I'm not going to be productive in my job, or I hate working here. I'm so burned out. I need to leave the organization and look for a little friendlier organization who's
Right.
not going to just layer change upon change upon change. So this is where it becomes very tricky because, as I mentioned earlier, our environment is just more complex, more ambiguous. And so change isn't going to go away. I think the advantage companies are going to have is how well do they manage it and how well do they lead their people through that change?
Well, we're talking about change fatigue, and I like that term. We're talking about change fatigue. What role, aside from the obvious, what role do you think COVID has played in change fatigue?
I think maybe a little bit, but I can't say that it has definitely. I think we would have gotten here regardless of COVID. COVID just maybe sped things up for us.
Hmm.
As to after 3 years, our norm now is working from home, or at least many of us knowledge workers. It is the benefit of working from home, not having a commute, right? Being able to dress down rather than dress up in the time that that may take, especially for ladies. The flexibility to be home and do small chores at home that you might not do until evenings or weekends. So that's our normal now for millions of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so now when leaders ask people to disrupt that normal and go back to work and go back to the office, that's created a whole different kind of disruption. And one that I think leaders need to really articulate and build a good business case as to why that is necessary. Not just because we have the real estate, not just because I'd love to see your face. I'd love to know that you are being productive. No, those aren't valid, compelling reasons for a lot of knowledge workers to disrupt their status quo just because someone's paying for a spot for me that I can be more productive and happy working from home.
Right. When I think about change fatigue, I want to share something with you. In my earlier life, when I was employed by someone in a managerial role, but not at the most senior executive level, I experienced a lot of change fatigue as well, both as being the change agent and the one stuck in the middle who wasn't authorizing the change.
Mm-hmm.
What about that? I mean, I know it's viscerally, it's real, but what do you think about that?
What specifically are you the middle people and how
Yeah,
they're?
so my roles over the course of time were primarily middle management when I was working for others. And there was a couple of cases where I was in a top level position, but for the majority was in a mid-level management position. So the dictums are coming down from the senior folks about the changes. And of course, then it's your responsibility to bridge the gap.
Yes. Yes. I think middle management gets hit the hardest because it's coming from the top, and the top often delegates down to one or two levels down. Now go implement. And I don't want to say they're immune, but they have a lot of faith in that team that they say go implement. And it falls on the shoulders of the middle managers who are trying to protect their team. Oh, not this change. That's not going to work for our team. So they're in this dichotomy of I need to protect my team. I
Right.
need to also, from mandate from on high, make this happen. So they get pushed into a lot of meetings, many that don't have immediate productivity. And they often find themselves in this struggle between I want to protect my team. I don't want them to get bogged down on this. So I'll take the load on for them, go to these meetings, have the voice that they need on top of doing what they already do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it hits middle managers quite hard.
Well, let's take that a little further. Let's talk about the role of the leader in change management. And let's look at the leader as being a manager at any level, senior executive, mid-level, or a frontline supervisor. Each of these are leaders in their own way. What are their roles in change management?
They have different roles at different places in the organization, but all leaders drive change. And that is important because as you're getting ready for the change, you almost need to address each level of leadership differently,
Right.
but get all leaders ready for the change. And when I say leaders drive change, we talked earlier about how it's people at the very top who are creating the change, right? Making those strategic decisions on the behalf of the organization, but they cannot abandon the change effort. They need to sponsor that. They need to be the face of it, even though they may delegate the day-to-day stuff, they can't delegate the whole thing. And I see that so often, especially in a very big company. A very big company, C-suite, they're focused on 3 to 5 years out. They're not getting involved in anything that's the day-to-day. They've got people under them focused on that. And as a result, you have this mismatch with leaders not being the face of what they've decided needs to happen, right? So you, at the highest level, need to be the face of this, even though that drags you down into more of the present day. And then you have that middle level, in which I mentioned earlier, they're the ones driving the change and implementing the change, right? So they have that role of being, as you mentioned earlier, Ed, I like it, change agent, right? So not only do they have the role to do what's best for their team, they have the role to do what's best for the organization. Very tough place to be. The other role of leaders is to get their team ready for the change. Mm-hmm. And this is where a lot of companies don't do enough work. They'll send an email. They might have a one-on-one. Hey, Ed, just to let you know, we've got this coming, this big change. This is why we're doing it. Go share it with your team. Well, leaders, supervisors. So let's look at the people who are supervising individuals. They're the most credible people in the organization to those individuals. It's not the CEO. There's very limited credibility for the lowest level individuals. The CEO still needs to be the face of that change, but it's their immediate supervisor who has the most credibility. So they'll go to their supervisor and say, is that true? Are we really doing this? And that's why you need, in any change, to keep those leaders well informed. You need to have a place where you have one source of truth so that you stop all rumors, right? Is this true? Well, let's go to our source of truth, whether that's on the intranet most time, right? And you have frequently asked questions and you keep them up to date, right? And so everybody has one place that they can go for information. But leaders are those most credible, right, with their immediate team. And as a result, they need to be ready on a different level than the people who are actually going to ultimately implement the change.
So it's important to make note of those who are responsible, those leaders, and maybe in some organizations it might be lower level, but anyway, whoever it is that is instigating the change or requesting the change, as it were, it is critical that they acknowledge their downstream, downline leaders who are going to actually bring it to fruition.
Yes.
Or as I often used to say to my students, it's nice to be sitting in the tippity top position or one of the top 3 spots, but you're absolutely of no value if you don't have the right people doing the work. Mm-hmm. And from your place in the C-suite to their place is a long distance, okay?
Yeah.
But you better make it very proximal to where you sit.
Yeah.
You can't afford to be sitting up here, or let's use that ivory tower term, okay, and think that just because you said so, it's going to be happening and be effective. And change seems to be a classic example. Let's face it, the vision is coming from the top of the organization. I mean, it may be derived from things that the lower level employees brought to mind, but that's where the vision still comes from. And so, yes, the change does originate there. But if you want it to be effective, you've got to bring the whole thing in. You don't just go out there and say, hey, here it is. Here's an email. Here's my plan. Boom, make it happen. That is not enough. The leader's role is far more than just envisioning something. It's actually facilitating that change. It's making that change possible, maybe more importantly, viable for the ones that actually have to do it.
Yeah. So really one of the first roles of a leader is to build a compelling, urgent business case for why we are doing this, right? What is the benefit? And you always want to start with the why. Why are we doing this? Because that can drive immediately the sense of urgency to get to the finish line. And oftentimes I find that leaders aren't doing that. So talk about high failure rate of change across all organizations, from small changes to transformational, from small mom and pop businesses to big Fortune 500 companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Change statistically is not successful in most cases. And it comes down to leadership. In my opinion, it's the approach that leaders take in making that change happen. So you use the example of, hey, let's just announce the change, send an email, train people, and then everybody's on board, right? As you have indicated, it doesn't happen like that. There's so much more that goes into getting people ready that I think there's really two reasons why there is a high failure rate. So I allude that leadership is part of it, and it absolutely is. It's also, though, understanding that if you're going to make change happen, you have to co-create. You have to get everybody's input. And you can't just say, oh, that team will come on board when we turn on the technology or when we're ready to implement, because that's just ignoring a whole group of people, right? And that's not what makes change successful. Change is messy and it's time consuming. And if you're going to do it with the intent that you're going to be successful, then you need to be mindful of everybody's got a place in the organization, and this change impacts them in very different ways. So you need to spend the time to have those individuals articulate what doesn't work for you, what isn't good about this new process.
Right.
And co-creating is just a great term to really help organize what we're doing. We're getting to a solution that everybody has touched, and therefore adoption will be higher when we get to the finish line. And whenever we want to turn on that technology or make that change happen. So it comes down to that approach, because a lot of times leaders are unaware that they should be doing that, and they are unaware of how much time it's going to take.
A good reminder, I think, for those who are instigating change is to keep in mind that change is more than vision. Change is an action that requires engaged people, informed people to bring to fruition, right?
Yes.
I hear you essentially identifying this potential disconnect. I think we might both agree there tends to be a certain amount of aloofness the further up you go in an organization, small or large for that matter. And at some point you might be inclined to think, this is what I want you to do it, without regard. And then you sit there and go, why didn't that work? Well, I told them to do it. They should know what to do. I pay them well. And hey, what's wrong with them? Why aren't they? But this is a really important thing, because the idea of organizational change is a continuum. It starts with a vision, but it goes on, right?
Yes.
And then it has to loop back again, for that matter.
Yeah. And there are consequences to rushing through change.
Mm-hmm.
One of the ones that's probably most relatable is the change happened to me. I had no voice in it. Well, if you're truly practicing change, you will widely give that voice, because that's what's needed for people to get on board. Whether they disagree at the beginning, but get on board before you turn on that change.
Right.
That's all that matters, is that everybody is ready for that day and they're bought into it. Therefore, they're actually going to do it. Technology is a really simple example here. So a company who is implementing a CRM or a customer relationship management tool, if the leaders are the one who are building that system and they don't ever ask the salespeople, well, what do you want? What works for you? That's a classic example where those salespeople are going to feel like the change happened to them.
Right.
And they're going to know about it. They're going to read the emails or at least skim them. They'll go to training. But often then what will happen is when you turn on that CRM, they're disengaged. And then leaders will say, okay, I'm mandating that you use the CRM. So then what happens? Salespeople and just people in general are very creative. And they're like, no worries, I'll create a workaround. And then they start putting junk data in the CRM, right? And then what happens? Well, junk data produces bad reporting, which ultimately leads to bad decisions. But that's a very simple example of, if I had chosen 2-3 users and had them co-create with me, then I've got some people already on board. And then they act as the ambassadors for that change. But more importantly, you're involving them so they don't feel like change happens to them. So then the next change that you're going to roll out, you might have more willing participants that say, yeah, I want to be part of that. I'll volunteer my time to help you out doing that. And that's ultimately where you want to go, not like, oh my gosh, another flavor of the quarter. We just need to keep our heads down and get through this. But a lot of leaders are reluctant to do that because it takes time.
Right. I love the term ambassador. I'm sorry, Jennifer, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, it not only takes time, Ed, it's very messy. Because if you have one team that wants this and a totally different approach from another team, it's going to maybe take extra time, but some negotiation skills, right? How do we get that so that the solution works for many people, not just leaders? And oftentimes I think that's what happens is leaders just delegate, make it happen, and they're not giving enough of their support to do what's necessary. Right? Find out from all people how the solution can be designed so it works for the most people, not leaving anyone out.
Works for the organization. Ultimately, a leader should be designing a vision that is going to be beneficial to the organization. And ideally, the culture of the organization supports the notion that being engaged is a part of that, and that employees are committed, i.e. loyal to the organization. Those things do lead to effective change, I believe. Would you say?
I do agree with that. Yes.
Okay. Jennifer, this is just amazing. We could talk until the cows come home, an old saying of mine. I don't know what happens when the cows get home. I guess that's when everything shuts down. But let me ask you, before we wrap up here, is there any parting comments that you'd like to make?
There is one. And I appreciate the last question here, Ed, because oftentimes companies don't realize there are change management expertise like myself, people who do this on a regular basis. And yet I don't want to encourage people to rely on me for every type of change, because change is so regular in organizations. I almost feel like this is a leader skill set of being able to manage change. Because if you happen just to rely on people like myself and hire outside expertise or build a team internally, it becomes that team, it becomes that group, right? And I'd really want to encourage people to learn what it takes and start building those leadership skills so that you're doing this internally, naturally for your team, and not relying on someone from the outside to constantly be doing the work for you. So I do see that with all the change that will continue to happen across any size organization, these are new leadership skills that leaders need to start building.
Well, one last question for you then. Do you find yourself in the position of being both the technical expert and trying to engage people in the process of developing the skill set? Or is there not enough time in the midst of change to do the latter?
No, it's critical that when I work with teams, I'm building their capacity.
Okay.
So I have to work with teams because I'm not an expert in their business. No. I don't know key players. I'm there to facilitate conversations to make deliverables happen. But if I'm not building the internal capacity of that leadership team and the organization, they're then going to only rely on me, right? Or someone like me. And they're going to find that is not conducive, not just from a bottom line perspective, but it becomes then the norm. We're going to hire a Jennifer to do it. and not build the capacity to do it themselves. And there's consequences of constantly having someone from the outside dictate what you should be doing. So my focus is I'm going to guide you through it. I'm going to build your capacity to build these skills. Will you be great at the beginning? Nope. That's not the expectation, right? The expectation is you try. I'm there to guide you as you try again. I'm there to guide you, but you need to learn these important and critical skills on your own.
I so appreciate that you cultivate the independence. You can get them through that moment, but you do not leave them without some degree of awareness, some tools they didn't have, with the capability of at least trying to go forward. As you say, they may not be experts at that moment, but they've got a lot more than they had, not only that, but a resolution to the immediate problem. And I think that's laudable. But I have to tell you, and I'm sure you have as well, I've worked around a lot of people who desire to come back again and again. In my own coaching practice, I say to people, if you need me to come back here, I've done something wrong. That is not the way things work. If you need a technical expert because you're unable to do something, don't want to do something, okay, that's fine. But each of us has a responsibility to impart knowledge, tools, and such to ease that, to grow their independence rather than become dependent upon us to do it for them. That's fantastic. I'm so happy to hear that. I can't say I'm surprised, but I'm happy to hear it anyway.
Thank you, Ed.
Jennifer, it's been a pleasure. Again, my guest, Jennifer Eichenberg, she is the owner of Eichenberg Associates, an organizational change management practitioner herself. And I think we can all agree change is a big thing. We all need to take control of change. We cannot ignore it. It's here to stay, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. Jennifer, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed. It's been a pleasure to talk to you and your audience.
Likewise. This is Ed Drozd, the Small Business Doctor, and as always, I wish you a healthy business.